Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are taking a look at Suomi M31 submachine guns. This is a gun that I have had people asking me to take a look at for a very long time, and today we actually have two really cool examples here of the early version and the later version. Now this gun goes back into the early 1920s. It was originally developed by Aimo Lahti, who is of course the predominant Finnish arms designer. He came up with an idea for a submachine gun, and it had his first version, which is he developed in 1924 and put it into production in 1926. It was similar to this pattern, but it was actually chambered for 32 ACP. European designation would be 7.65 by 17 millimeter, and had a really distinctive semicircular magazine because, of course, the 32 is a semi-rimmed round, and when you start stacking those, you get quite a lot of curvature. So that was produced commercially. Lahti set up basically a sales company to sell them and then subcontracted the manufacture out to various factories. And it was not hugely successful. It had a couple of problems. For one thing, he had recessed the front of the bolt face, which was there to have some improvements for feeding, but it also caused some problems for extraction and reliability issues in general. And with the general, not huge commercial success of this 1926 pattern gun, he went back to the drawing board, redesigned some things, and most substantially rechambered the gun for 9mm parabellum. And that came out in 1931, or that was adopted by the Finnish military in 1931. What his sales company did with this new pattern was take it to Tikkakoski, one of the major Finnish arms manufacturers, and see if he could subcontract them to manufacture it. And instead, they just offered to buy the rights outright. And he took the deal, and Lahti's holding company or sales company for the Suomi submachine gun disappeared. It went away. And instead, Tikkakoski had the rights and manufactured these guns in reasonable quantity. So they were adopted by the Finnish military, and they were manufactured through World War II. In total, just over 56,000 of these were made and delivered to the Finns, to the Finnish army. Another 15,300 or so were manufactured for export. They were sold to a number of different countries. Sweden got some, Croatia got some, Germany ordered them a couple times, Denmark ordered some, Switzerland ordered some. I think that's pretty much it. But 15,000 sold for export. Now, a couple interesting things about these guns. They are rather heavy guns. So the early version here, which you'll see has just a bare muzzle, that comes in at 4.7 kilos. That's 10.8 pounds. And the later version, with a sort of a muzzle brake on it, added another 0.2 of a kilo. So that's 4.9 kilos, which is just over 11 pounds. This submachine gun weighs more than an M1 Garand rifle, if you want to put it in that sort of perspective. Fires 9mm, open bolt. It's mechanically a pretty simple gun. And the magazines, however, were a bit unusual. The original magazines were actually, there was a stick and a drum. It was a 20-round stick that you could kind of cram like 25 into if you really had to, and a 40-round, somewhat smaller diameter drum. Those were replaced once World War II began with a 71-round drum, which you probably only want to load 70 into, and a 50-round stick mag. And the 50-round stick mag is really cool because it is one of the very few military applications of a quad stack mag. So we're used to magazines having two columns of cartridges side by side. Well, the Suomi magazine here actually has two sets of two columns of cartridges that combine into one feed stack at the top. They were produced, they were reasonably reliable, but not quite reliable enough to stay in production after the war. After the war ended in the 1950s, they actually transitioned to a 36-round, much more traditional double stack stick magazine. That's what you see most of today. There are a lot of those magazines that are now available on the market, but they weren't actually produced until the 1950s. So all of the World War II use, or rather the Winter War and the continuation war use of these guns, was done primarily with the drums and with the 50-round, what are called coffin mags, because the profile kind of looks like a coffin. So controls on the Lahti are actually a little bit unusual. It has a safety mechanism and fire selector here. So this is semi-auto, and you push it back, and it is safe. This is really sticky. Anyway, all the way forward is full auto. The rear sight is actually a tangent leaf. It looks like it's one of those 2,000-yard sorts of sights, but it's actually graduated only out to 500 meters, which is plenty for an open bolt iron-sighted submachine gun. The bolt handle is a unique design feature here, and it is located in the back, kind of like a bolt-action rifle. And you can see the bolt there, and you pull it back here. What this is actually also very similar to is the AR-15. And this serves an important function, or a valuable function, on a submachine gun, in that it means there is no open channel in the receiver tube for dirt or mud or gunk to get in through. The open channel is on the very bottom where it's covered by the stock. So that makes good sense. Now, one of the consequences of that, however, is you have a bolt which is very finely machined and fitted into the receiver. You have no openings, really, in the receiver. And so that means if you don't do something about it, you're going to have the bolt compressing all the air in the back of the receiver every time it cycles, and that's going to slow down the bolt stroke. So on the back of the Suomi end cap, we have 4 big drilled holes, actually 5 holes in there. And those are a vent so that the air that's in the receiver tube can easily get out as the bolt moves backward. The rate of fire on these is a rather high 900 to 1,000 rounds per minute, probably 900. That's a pretty high rate of fire for these guns. That's part of why they had to be equipped with relatively large magazines, so you didn't run out of ammunition very quickly. But it was made relatively controllable by the fact that the gun did weigh 10, almost 11 pounds. Aimo Lahti's original version of the gun had a barrel jacket out here just as a hand protector that ended at the muzzle. So no muzzle brake, just a bare muzzle there. Reacting to some concern about muzzle climb on these guns because of that high rate of fire, Tikkakoski and the Finnish army decided to add a muzzle brake to the front, and apparently kind of pissed off Lahti in the process. He didn't think it ought to be on there. While this did reduce muzzle climb somewhat, it also in turn caused its own reliability issues, namely that these holes provided a really good place for snow and mud to get into and then stick in and then freeze in and then block the muzzle, and that's a problem. One other intermittent problem that these did sometimes suffer from was actually the bolt freezing to the receiver. You did have a potential if you were going in and out and changing temperature inside and outside, you could have condensation develop on the inside of the receiver. If you have the bolt cocked open, it can freeze in place, you go to fire it, and you do have the potential for the bolt to move just ahead of the sear and then jam where it appears to be all the way open. Then when you take it inside and it thaws, the bolt can drop forward and fire around. That's a problem. I don't know that that happened a lot, but it was something that was recorded as an issue. Disassembly is pretty cool and easy, and this is one of the major improvements from the 1926 pattern gun to the 1931 pattern gun, is that we now have an easily removable barrel shroud and a quick detach barrel. So you just rotate this lever down, you can then unscrew, well, not even unscrew, there's just 4 lugs holding the barrel jacket on, so it slides out. You'll notice we have a little washer here. This allows you to easily headspace different barrels, and then the barrel just slides straight out of the front trunnion there. So that's the front end of the receiver, disassembled there. This is a big milled receiver. It looks like it ought to be a stamped tube, but it's not. This is a big, heavy chunk of metal. This is where most of the weight of the gun is. Now to take the bolt out, we pull the bolt handle back just slightly because this lug on the bolt acts as a lock in this channel that prevents the end cap from rotating. Hold that back and unscrew this. This will release the recoil spring, and so if you're not careful, it can go shooting across the room when it's fully disassembled. There we go. Now we have our recoil spring and guide rod and end cap. Unlike a lot of later submachine guns, this continues to use a very small diameter spring. To get the bolt out, I'm just going to depress the trigger, pull it back past the sear, and the bolt slides right out. I've got two surfaces on here on the bolt, front and back, that make a nice, smooth, tight fit against the receiver tube. Because it is a milled tube, you're able to get very close tolerance. This is machined, the inside of the tube is machined. You can do that, where on a stamped tube metal receiver, you tend to have much looser tolerances. So the recoil spring and guide rod actually live inside the center of the bolt. What some of the German submachine gun designers would determine or realize is that you could actually have a recoil spring that was the full diameter of the bolt, and then it would be unable to kink just sitting inside the receiver. The Lahti here, you still have to be careful when you reassemble the gun to get the recoil guide down into the bolt so that the spring doesn't kink up and cause problems. Now, it's not like most submachine guns are all that difficult to disassemble, but the Suomi certainly is not one of the harder ones. So here you have it completely field stripped. Here we have the three major patterns of magazine. These two were both produced and used through World War II, through the Continuation War and the Winter War. This is the more common one to find today, and these were manufactured in the 1950s. So this is a double stack, double feed magazine. The coffin magazine and the drum are both single feed magazines, because with the drum, of course, you just have a single spool of cartridges. So we can open this up by pushing the button on the back, opening, maybe, there we go. Opening this, and then the front of the magazine comes off. So Finnish tactics made quite good use of these guns in their fighting against the Russians. They had what they called moti tactics, or chopping, where they would basically ambush a Russian column, the Russians being pretty much restricted to roads and trails through the forest in the winter, where the Finns on skis could easily move around the flanks of a column and then attack simultaneously, cut the column into a number of discrete pieces, and then basically slaughter everyone in each individual piece. This is an area where you had guys like the infamous Aimo Lahti, the White Death, the most successful sniper in the Finnish military, he did a lot of his shooting with a Mos Nagant, an iron-sighted Mos Nagant, of course, but he also made extensive use of the M31 Suomi at close ranges that had a volume of fire that was just overwhelming, or at least very effective. So the Suomi really is a gun that has quite a bit of legend behind it. These were put to very good effect by Finnish soldiers fighting against the Russians, and they became rather famous submachine guns as a result. And it doesn't hurt that they have some kind of unique features and very large magazines to make them popular. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider taking a look at my Patreon page. It is support from folks there at $1 a month that makes it possible for me to travel and find these guns and bring them to you. Thanks for watching.